Good evening. I declare the agenda briefing forum of the 17th of March 2026 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:33pm. Welcome councillors, staff, members of the public here and at home, and the media as well. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on this evening, and I recognise their ongoing connection to this land here in Subiaco. Okay, taking attendances now, I see 8 councillors here present in person. Good evening to you all. And I think we've got the whole executive leadership team here in person also, and good evening to your various staff members who are accompanying you. Okay, any leave of absence we'll deal with next week. Are there any disclosures of interest, councillors, for any of the agenda items this evening? No approved deputations. Announcements, there's nothing too serious this week. I will, however, note that it is St. Patrick's Day, so to anyone with an Irish-sounding surname, happy St. Patrick's Day to you. You can have the rest of the night off after we get through all the questions this evening, and that applies to me too with my Irish heritage. But councillors have been talking about apples and comparing apples with other apples a lot recently, so I thought I'd give you an Irish blessing. May your days be as sweet as a ripened apple from an Irish orchard. May the luck of the shamrock follow you, and may you always find a harvest of joy in every corner of your life. The end. But now, to the more serious stuff. Working through the agenda, C1, Development WA referral for 154 Subiaco Road, affordable and social housing. Councillors, any questions on C1? Oh, is that why there's an asterisk? Okay, that will be on the agenda next week, but we won't talk about it tonight. C2, the Council Plan Project 3.3, Hiddleston Lane. Any questions on C2? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor. Is this proposal good value for money? Through you, Mayor.
I'm sure the answer is yes, but Director Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So over the past few years, the city has embarked on a number of public realm upgrades. So those things include things like Seddon Street, Postal Walk, Forest Street, recently Rupert Street Pocket Park, Duke Street as well, and Ada Street. And we've been considering what the price per square metre is. And this would absolutely fit in the lower limit of the price per square metre. And Subiaco is quite interesting, given its historical settlement. It's been here for a long time. There are a lot of services, and it's a constrained site as well. So understanding all those factors, every time you come up with a concept and dig into the ground, you can find interesting things under there. In considering that, I'll get to the figures. We are thinking that this one is going to be anywhere from $300 to $500 per square metre, for example, whereas previous examples in hardscaping upgrades can be anywhere up to $1,500 per square metre. So we do consider that this will be good value, and this also presents an opportunity where a private partner would input to the construction and design as well. So again, if they weren't there, then the bill would be footed completely by the city. So there's a lot of factors in that, but we do consider that it is good value.
Just to follow up on that, it would appear that we're contributing twice as much as the private partner. Why would that be?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Look, this is a city project. This is a council plan project. it's city-owned land. So this is an opportunity where there's a win-win situation where the private partner is redeveloping their site. It's an existing heritage building, and they see an opportunity to plug into the public realm upgrade. So if it was a council's project and this renovation was not going in, the council would foot 100% of the bill. And this contribution just tags on to the redevelopment happening there. We'd like for people to contribute more. However, there's no obligation on them to contribute in any event.
Just add, if I could add, just in consideration of other projects. So the project in relation to Seddon Street, a component of that formed part of the development conditions. So with 50% of the cost related to the One Subi or Blackburn development. So that was conditioned. But in addition to that, Blackburn also contributed to Sagar Lane North as well, which they weren't required to do. So sometimes developers see the benefits in the public realm as well. And this is a case where the people redeveloping the old Hiddleston building, they don't have to contribute, but they see it as is good for the community as well for them, and in relation to the way in which they've designed how you come in and out of that building. So they don't have to, they have. We've looked to develop all the different laneways that we've got over time, and the first one was Wormsley Lane, and I don't believe there was a private contribution in relation to that. So I suppose it's rare in that sense that developers sought to do this and make a contribution as well to what is the public realm and the city's asset.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Look, are there risks in allowing them to become the lead in this development?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. In any construction, there are risks. Risks are considered in the design phase, but once you start digging, you don't know what is going to be underground. By having someone else undertake the construction phase, we are shifting those risks to that contractor. However, there would be terms under the agreement that would mitigate any risks on the council. So I would say that the risks of issues occurring during construction is shifted to whoever's undertaking that construction, rather than being on the council if we were to do that by ourselves. There's a minor risk that the developer may not complete the construction, but given they are such a large firm and they are currently renovating their own building, we see that as generally pretty low. So we would, every project has a risk, but there is no additional risk in having this being contracted out to someone else.
CEO.
Perhaps if I could also add into the broader context of WA, it's not unusual for a developer to provide infrastructure for the state and local government. In fact, most of the urban corridor, the developments of recent years have been undertaken by private developers and then handed those assets over to each of the local government authorities. And there's processes in place, including in this project, where we undertake to make sure that when that asset is done to the standard that we'd expect, because we need to maintain that public realm forever. So that's our responsibility. So it does form part of the project, does form part of the assessment. There's always risks in every project, but we've done a number of these in the past, including Seddon Street, and worked well with somebody else delivering the works for us. But in all the other ones, we've done them ourselves as well. So either way, there are risks associated with projects, but given they've got sort of control of the site, it sort of adds to the benefits that that they derive by doing the project for us. In addition, obviously they're good working with a lot of the contractors themselves. They know what produces good value for money. So I think it's a win-win when we find somebody that's interested in doing these projects with us and wants to take the lead.
Councillor Powell.
Just one last question.
Be good to have a single officer comment on this. CEO, you're across it. Did you want to speak to it? No? Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I'm just grabbing that comment up now. No, that's all right. Look, under the Local Government Act and the Functions and General Regulations of 1996, it's just the way that we are procuring this work to be done. Now, given that Human Urban, who are developing the building next door, have control of the site, and they're investing in there. They are the only ones who are actually in the position now to be able to undertake these works. So given that, we've considered that they are the only one who could do this at this certain time. In addition to that, they are the only one who is going to be likely to contribute to this laneway upgrade as well, given the current situation there at the moment.
The CEO would like a turn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's not unusual for us to use this section of the Local Government Act. We've used it before on numerous occasions where it's either a sole supplier or for any other reason. So the any other reasons are the manner in which this has come about by the developer controlling the site and also contributing. So therefore, it's open for council to determine that one is enough. We're comfortable with that. There's been the value managed and the proper oversight, and for council to determine that the use of that section of the Local Government Act is appropriate. And certainly we've done it, I'd say, probably 4 or 5 times in my time at the City of Subiaco.
Councillor Fife.
Yeah, and through you, Mayor, just wondering what input the city's had in terms of the artistic design of the site to ensure compatibility and complementarity to the other, lanes that have a sort of a quirky historic feel to them. Are we participating in that design?
Director, Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So through the Subi Green Walks initiative, we had some concepts design prepared on Walmsley Lane, Canis Lane, Hiddleston Lane, and some of the other Subi Pops as well. So we had a conceptual document which looked at the features and the characteristics of each site. Now, we have provided that to Human Urban, and we have collaborated in the initial concept design that they've prepared. Now, there are additional points where the city would need to sign off and approve the final design that's going to be detailed. That is to ensure that's within the character that we're looking to achieve, but also to ensure that maintenance and the materials chosen is appropriate for our ongoing assets team and ongoing maintenance.
Councillor Pine.
On the cost for the project, are we actually up for proportion in terms of like a proportion of the total cost, or is it an absolute 300,000 that we're contributing? Because obviously, if the cost comes down, are we still up for the 300,000 and potentially the developer up for nothing?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So through that process, in considering the design, we'll have a look at what the costings look at. This is a maximum $300,000. So putting that money in there, there's no additional funds to be put in. We think that the current design is looking at current conceptual design is at around $500,000. So that would need a $200,000 addition from Human Urban. That could be value managed slightly, but given that we would control the final sign-off, we would like to make sure that our contribution is matched, not to the exact amount, but a fair amount is put in.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, at the moment there's the lanterns that are installed. There's a mural on one of the walls near Rockaby Road, and there's also the dragonflies at the other end of Rockaby Road. Are those items planned to be removed, or are they going to be staying in place?
Thank you. The dragonflies, I believe, are on a private building, so they are likely to be removed as part of the renovation. The lanterns and the street art in that laneway is due for renewal in any event. So as part of this process, we'll look at a holistic review, and it will just provide additional opportunities in the future to be able to program that space and have other artistic concepts put in there as well.
Can you let me know when the lanterns were installed, and were they sponsored by Hiddleston's and at their cost, and when was the mural done? Thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I'll have to take the lanterns on notice. I believe the mural would have been done as part of the No More Blank Walls Festival, but as with any of our murals and art, they're there for a short time, and a lot of that concept is that it's ever evolving and ever changing, always inspiring people to come and check out Subi, because it's not always staying the same, it's always reinvigorating and revitalising.
And do we know how much the mural cost us and when that was put in? Thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. It would have been as part of the No More Blank Walls package, so it was I'd say it was a couple of years ago now when that was put in. I'll take the cost of the mural on notice as well, but I believe it was included in the whole No More Blank Wall, so it might be difficult just to get the cost for that one.
Just on the in the report on the resource considerations, mentions there that the current costing's just over 500,000, and that the HU are undertaking a value engineering and design review process to manage cost to the designated budget of 450,000 as proposed. So will the contract, if we go ahead with this, will the contract terms that we put in place state that we won't be putting in any more than 300,000 in the event that they are not able to manage that costing?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, the council resolution will be 300,000. So as officers, if we were ever to change that, we will need to come back to council.
If I can supplement your answer, if you look at the risk considerations section of the report, it says legal and governance risks will be mitigated through the legal agreement to be entered into, which will provide the guardrails for the project to be delivered and mechanisms for both parties should disagreements arise. So the disagreements arising bit is not what we're asking about, but the guardrails, I think, is what we're talking about when we talk about a fixed term contribution. Councillor Johnston.
And I wondered with the Hiddleston Lane, how does the proposed redevelopment by the private developer, how does that fit with the, what City of Subi was planning for that? Because, we've got Subi Streets, and we've also got our public art reference group and their strategy. So how does this align with things that we already have in place?
Thank you, and through you, it actually aligns very well with our council plan project, Super Green Walks. So by a developer coming in and not only upgrading and renovating their site, but also contributing to a laneway upgrade, it aligns to what the city through council had planned to do in any event, whether it occurs now with the developer contribution or at a later time. All those other parts about public art and the character of the lane will be determined through the final design, and that would need city sign-off as well. So all this is doing is allowing for a private partner to come on board to blend in their public realm aspect with the city's public realm aspect, and all of that needs to be consistent with the character and the design that we're looking for all of Subi Green Walks and our town centre. So in a nutshell, it fits in very well with what council's vision for its town centre is.
CEO.
Yeah, just in terms of that, I have sent previous information around the history about how this came out. It started back in about 2014. There was elements done by some preeminent sort of designers in the city. That then followed by a place plan, I think in around 2018-19, and then a range of other elements, and then culminating in the Subi Green Walks that in 2022, which led to the sort of Walmsley Lane as a test case. So council been involved through this process in each council and many iterations to arrive on the design elements that are important, that mean that it's Subi not replicating, whereas in the past, I suppose when Hiddleston Lane was originally undertaken, it was undertaken outside of that work that had been done. So a series of work has built on the other, of which council have been involved with right through since 2014.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Burns.
Firstly, who's the initiating party here, us or the co-contributors?
Mr. Director.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, I would say it's council, given that it's had a targeted strategy of upgrading its laneways through Subi Walks for a while.
Okay, so we've approached them, fine. What approach was made to the landowners to the north that own 3,003 square metres of land?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So the development and the renovation was proposed, and a planning application was put in. So that was the key for the city approaching the redevelopment in Human Urban. Now we understand Human Urban have actually tried to negotiate and engage with the neighbouring landowners on the other side of Hiddleston Lane. However, they have failed to effectively engage. I don't believe the other party was forthcoming in wanting to contribute. So the design initially did consider how it may open up into the other areas. However, we understand that landowner was not in a position at this time to contribute and further consider this proposal.
That doesn't surprise me, with no disrespect to the owners, I know them, but wouldn't it have been us that should be of approaching them? Like if it's our project, in conjunction with private developers, but we're the initiating party, shouldn't we have been the initiating? You're making a comment to me about what our joint venturers did in talking to the other side of the lane. Shouldn't have we been doing it?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So from the initial concept, which we prepared for many lanes, this was further detailed by Human Urban. So given that they were preparing the further design, they actually tried to reach out. There's no issue with the city trying to reach out. However, we were satisfied that they made the best endeavours to try and reach the neighbouring properties.
All right, if I can. Look, I'll take that for what it may. I'm not going to comment further, but I think you might be able to guess how I feel about the answer. Look, the last thing, I hear this all the time coming up, so it's across the board. It's always might cost more because you never know what's underground in an old city. I mean, why don't we run ground piercing radar, over these sort of things? We found a whole bunch of stuff at the Pocket Park on Bagot. Ground piercing radar, looks like a wheelbarrow with some electronics on it. It's not exactly rocket science. Why is it we'll just find out what we find out instead of doing this before, instead of just saying, well, sure, there can be depths, but ground piercing radar is deep. I don't get it. Why do I always hear we might get a surprise?
Thanks, Councillor. Director, Technical Services.
Thank you. So to your point, Mark, it's quite loud. Councillor Burns, sorry. Piercing radar is quite good at certain depths and with certain materials. So there's certain limitations as far as depths with it. You normally use it for fairly shallow depths. And the other thing which you often have to do, and we're having to do it in fact on a project for Rocky Road South, is you'll run the ground piercing radar across the site. You'll identify a lot of the services. Oftentimes you do need to do further investigations because what you're provided is just a very high level and quite limited details on some types of particularly services and based on materials. So oftentimes you'll have to use that as an initial indication, and then you have to do further proofing to dig and core and find it. So it's good for it's good for shallow and for certain materials, but it's not a be all, and you just still need to do proofing, and it's still never 100%. And there's other things that it's not ideal for as well.
Thanks, Director, for letting everybody else know that they didn't, but I got a pretty good idea how ground piercing radar works, and I've run it over on one particular site over like 7 hectares. Okay, so I know how and how it operates. My question is, taking everything you just said and its limitations, which are fine, do we do it anyway? Why wouldn't you do it to discover, with the overrider that but it didn't hit this target, and there's certain items it won't pick up, right? But why would so have we done it, or it's just let's wait and it's a wait and see. All I'm trying to establish is before I'll accept we're going to find something out that we didn't see. Have we ran ground piercing radar over it, and did we run ground piercing radar over the park before we discovered the problems there? Thanks.
Director.
Thank you. Look, there's a range of things that we might do, including radar. Yes. Look, I can't answer right now if we've undertaken ground piercing radar, but there are a range of things that you can do to understand what's under the ground. You did mention Rupert Street Pocket Park, and in terms of Rupert Street Pocket Park, we had minor variations of less than 3% of the total cost. None of that could have been picked up by ground piercing radar, for example. So the variations were to do mainly with the negotiations with an adjoining landowner and water pressure. So what I'm just trying to paint a picture of is there's a range of things that you can do, and we've been pretty well in managing variations.
Okay, let's remove the pocket park. It's a different sort of issue. On this particular matter that's coming to us next week, we've talked about cost. There's been questions from the councillors about cost, and we've talked about, it was your comment that you never know what's under the ground. I'm just saying we're talking about sums of money, right? What have we, yes or no, before this item's being presented to us, has somebody run ground piercing radar over? It's a yes or no, not there's possibilities and all this sort of stuff. It's just yes or no.
We'll answer for the city. I don't know if we can answer for human air, but
Yeah, I suspect not, because the depth by which this would go, the depth by which this is going, I expect no. And in terms of the risk around that, the contribution is limited in the terms of the contract to the 300,000. So if there was something in terms of latent conditions, human air would need to deal with it. Whereas if this project is ours, we'd have to deal with it.
councillors, any other questions? Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of other questions. How much did Walmsley Lane cost?
Director of Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I'll have to take that one, the exact cost on notice. I can't give you a ballpark at the moment. Walmsley Lane was a very different treatment. There was no lifting of paving. It was only a surface treatment. And essentially we installed some planters and we installed some wiring and there was a public art contribution as well. So it's not really a like for like analysis. This one there would be a more invasive, lifting paving and understanding services as well.
Yes, thanks. I've got a few other questions. And do we need to be removing the paving? Like, is there the scope and is it feasible that we would go back to human urban and leave some of it, make that they do and the area that hasn't had anything done to it? Because at the moment the lanterns look good, the mural looks good. I would question that there's a requirement there. We're being asked to put in double the amount of budget that we had slated for this. Is there any scope for human urban to reduce the area that they would be developing and leave what's in place in situ for the time being while it's looking good?
CEO.
So, as I mentioned, when Hiddleston Lane was originally done, was without these documents in place to guide the redevelopment of the area. We've provided that to Human Urban. They've engaged people to undertake the work, and they're very keen to get a pretty good outcome, as you'd expect, because they're doing a significant renovation of a heritage building at Hiddleston Lane. So, to some extent, we could pose the question, but I suspect they want a particularly good outcome and they want to attract people in there. And when you do a finished product, as we did, say, on Seddon Street, that's the only reason why Dome came back and invested in the area, because they wanted a good outcome in terms of the public realm, which we were able to deliver. So we could ask them, but I suspect they put a lot of time and energy into developing what they consider to be a good outcome. As I said, if we did it ourselves, we'd be paying 100%. There's an opportunity by which they make a contribution. They carry the risk associated with whether the costs increase or not, and we get a finished product that we believe is consistent with the documentation and designs that we've undertaken in the past that we've workshopped with elected members.
Okay, we're playing doubles this evening. The Director of Development Services says that he's got something to add to the previous answers. So, Mr. Petrovsky, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The condition of Hiddleston Lane along the entire Hiddleston Lane is actually quite poor. So some of it is paved, some of it has got some slabs, and some of it is asphalt as well. So if we were to be replacing some paving, you'd want the whole area to match and to actually feed and bleed into both Roland Street and Rockaby Road. So there absolutely is scope to do small bits of it, but it actually won't have the effect that you'll need when you do that. Also, when you're starting to look at drainage and levels and disability access, sometimes you can't just do portions by itself. So you have to make sure that you consider all of those things at one time. Otherwise, you get some interesting differences in what you might get either through materiality, because you can't even get those pavers that you get there anymore. There's also an opportunity to look at the trees in there as well to improve them and ensure that it all ties in with some of the other bits that we've done on Rockaby Road and our other Subiaco.
Just how is it then that we had this slated for $150,000 in the budget and now we're being asked to double it?
That's a great question, and through you, Mayor. So the initial $150,000 was what we thought we might be considering for this side of the financial year. So that will include design documentation and potentially some construction costs. This has come up a little bit earlier with Human Urban contributing as well. So it was never considered that this was going to be a $150,000 project. That was the component that we thought that we would be doing this side of the financial year, with the construction to follow. So it's just bringing that construction aspect forward and putting it all into this financial year rather than having it spread over two.
Thanks for that. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. A couple of questions. The lights are sponsored by Hiddleston, I believe. There's signage there that says that. There were previous lights there before. Were they also sponsored by Hiddleston? And is there anything in the proposal to continue to work with Hiddleston in relation to the project, bearing in mind they're certainly engaged at the moment with the lights that are there and have a long association with the site?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Look, this design will continue to evolve, and Hiddleston has been an extremely important family to Subi. There are aspects of lighting and containery lighting there that we could tie into the fact that Hiddleston's been an important part of the Rockaby Road streetscape for a while, and this would require additional design. So yes, there is absolutely aspects for Hiddleston to continue to be involved. We've had some preliminary thoughts about catenary lighting and understanding how that may flow throughout the site.
That would be great. My follow-up question relates to overpainting murals. Are there other examples where we've overpainted murals in Subiaco? I'm not across all of them. So, yeah, are there some other examples?
Thank you, and through you, Matt. There will be some coming up very shortly, but public art is ephemeral. Now, Walmsley Lane, we had some windows installed, and that then turned into a mural as well. So there are, and I can't tell you exactly off the top of my head now, but there have been over the years times when either the murals have deteriorated or they've got to a state where they needed to be painted over. Generally, we've been pretty good in ensuring public art is replaced by public art. So there's always opportunities, and we'd look for that as well. But it actually ties into the continual revitalisation of Subi as an art scene, rather than keeping the same thing, until it's not looking so good. So yes, it happens all across Subi. It happens actually all across the world, where public art is reinvigorated into the next thing.
Can I through
CEO.
the chair? Thank you. He's reluctant to let me speak. One of the important aspects of all the art that we've done through No Blank Walls and prior to that and before that is when we engage with the artists, they're aware that at some point in time their art may be painted over. So that's part of the process, which they're entirely comfortable with. Some of the No Blank Walls are on private walls, which like one had a development application already, which is right next to Forest Walk, for example. So that's well known that development will make that art go away, so to speak. So it's not unusual, and the artist is aware that it may well be painted over or may form something else. So that's not unusual.
Councillor O'Connor.
One tiny follow-up question. If we progress with this and if the mural gets painted over, would we ensure that we have what I would call an archive record for posterity? I'm assuming we've got some fabulous pictures anyway, but something that actually says who did it, when it was done, that sort of information. So we've got a catalogue effectively of this type of thing.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Yes, I believe we already have that in stock. So we have a public record of all of our things, the artists and the contact details and all that sort of stuff. So we can share that with you.
Councillor Johnston.
Have Hiddleston's been made aware of this proposal?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yes, I believe they have.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. Have the neighbours on the other side of the lane been consulted, and what are their views?
Director of Development Services.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor. I believe they have been consulted, and they were not interested in contributing at this stage. However, I don't believe that they raise any considerable objections, as it wouldn't impact the way that they currently use their buildings.
Councillor Pine.
You mentioned earlier that you had the cost of the project was phased over this year and next year. What was the overall cost of the project that the city had envisaged to spend on the lane?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So the initial costing was some detailed work to be undertaken through design. Through that, you would then have an audible probable cost that might come out through that. So you actually you use the initial work to understand what the final costing is going to be. So we didn't actually have an overall costing, because that will depend on what the design is and the intervention that you have through that.
Councillor Johnston.
Generally, when you refer to no blank walls and other murals we've had done, generally how long would you expect those murals to be left in situ before they get painted over?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, each mural is different. So generally, if you're doing a good job, murals might last anywhere from a couple of years to 10 years. It depends on the circumstances, on how they're orientated with the sun, the materials used, and also the building that they're on. So we've had murals and pieces of artwork that might be only there for a year or so, and then they move on. It's the whole understanding that artwork is forever changing. It's not uncommon that an artwork might only be there for a year or two before it's moved on. In fact, we have art installations who are only here for a month. Particularly through Subi Bloom. So, yeah.
Sorry, I'm referring to murals being painted over, not an installation that travels, or something that's moved on to another location, but something that we've had deliberately done and commissioned and then painted over.
Yep, so Walmsley Lane was a good example that lasted just over a year.
Okay, councillors, any other questions on C2? Nope. Okay, we'll move on. C3. The Civic Building and Gardens. Why is there an asterisk there? Okay, any questions on C3? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. Firstly, through you, we see fit. Where are we currently at the money the council authorised, which is pretty much the only thing we've done in a public forum, the $3.3 million?
Director, Corporate Services.
Yep, through you, presiding member. So I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but there is $1 million in the budget this year for the design work, in terms of an estimate of how much of that contract may be expended, and we're on track at present.
Okay, maybe I'll put it a different way. Okay, I didn't understand the answer. Okay, so we allocated a bunch of money. How much has passed from us to the architects? But could it be any more to date? Could it be any more clearer?
Through your presiding member, I've actually got the figure now, because our manager of finance is in the room and has provided me with the figure. So it is $731,000 year to date.
Councillor Burns.
Has any thought been given to the officer recommendation as to where this varies us from the monies that were, or is it a part of the monies, and it wouldn't alter the previous motion, or is it sees us spending more money outside of the initial concepts?
Director, Corporate Services.
I guess, the information that I have from my team is that we expect not to go over the amount that we had budgeted for this financial year, if that helps. So I'd have to take it on notice if you wanted more information in terms of any variations.
Yeah, take it on notice. I'd like to know exactly what this recommendation, how it alters the previous motion. Thank you. If I could continue. There's, look, I can see where this is coming from, but obviously, no, I can see where this is coming from. But what seems to be lacking is it's a moving forward recommendation that's trying to take into consideration public comments and everything else. But the one that seems to be most ignored, other than 11 words on the 8th page of a 7-page report, is the just stop point 4, which is do not proceed further, blah, blah. It's 11 words. Perhaps I'm hearing more than, and I'm getting to a question, I'm not debating, perhaps I'm hearing more from the public than, I'm interpreting more from the public that it's just stop this in its tracks and look again, not try and navigate a different path for it.
Councillor Burns, I really am looking forward to the question. What is the question?
Okay, here's the question. Okay, why doesn't this report say that the CEO will, give due consideration to stopping the bloody thing? That's the question. This is just a let's.
Okay. There's been a lot of discussion in workshops and by email about what the CEO has been tasked with doing all those months, years ago, and what he's duty bound to bring back to council. There's been a lot of discussion amongst councillors about what they need in order to move forward. If the specific question is why doesn't this report recommend putting a halt on the project, the CEO would be well placed to answer why that is, but it's going to be a pretty good answer, I would have thought, because we've been discussing it for a number of weeks already. CEO.
Yes, I have a range of 5 council resolutions, and I've got a contract in place to proceed. It's always an option for council to determine whether they want to proceed or not proceed. The recommendation relates to receiving the information, taking time to consider that, and look at the options that the community, as well as a number of elected members, have asked us to consider. So it's always open for council to determine whatever they wish to, and the CEO has to implement them. That's what's required under law, and that's what I do. Council are not bound by previous resolutions of council. They inherit them, but ultimately it's up to the CEO to implement a council resolution. So until such time I had a resolution to stop a project, then I have to go on the previous resolutions, in this case 5, that council required me to deliver particular things.
Councillor Burns.
I'm having trouble. My question is helping me understand this. At the electors meeting in December, the CEO made a comment, right? He's, take it for what it's worth, in his defence, that he doesn't decide to do anything, we tell him what to do. Okay, that's a fact. What was lacking in that comment to me, which I don't understand?
Well, hang on, Councillor Burns. We're not dissecting answers given at the annual electors meeting in December. What do you want to know about the report that's in front of us?
What goes to it? Okay, if you just bear with me.
I'm trying to.
Okay, well, just bear with me, please.
Yeah, I'll try a bit harder.
Okay,
continue.
Thank you. All right. The CEO tells me as an elector at that meeting, because that's what I'm there for, that his job is to do what the council says. I agree. Okay. But 99.999% of everything that comes before us to decide on is his recommendation. This says office recommendation, but it's his recommendation. So it's like, I just do what you tell me, but I tell you what you should be telling me. So where I'm leading to on that concept, because this is what it's saying, okay? Where I'm leading to is, other things that were said on that day. We're told.
Hang on, Councillor Burns. This is not a recommendation about anything that happened at the annual electors meeting. In February, we resolved to do certain things with the motion that was carried at the annual electors meeting in relation to the civic precinct. It's a new month, it's a new resolution, and there's been a lot of discussion amongst councillors about what we needed to move forward with this project, and that feedback has been taken on board in a collaborative kind of way, but ultimately this is the staff recommendation, and if you don't like it, you know what the process is next week. But what is the question that you would like answered this evening?
All right, I'll leave it at this then. What's the current deadline for an alternative to stop this in its tracks? When does the council need it by?
Well, I mean, it would depend on how you propose to stop this in its tracks.
So by an alternate recommendation, not the officer's recommendation, by my recommendation as a alternative, which is, okay, let's bloody stop. Okay.
Okay, you're obviously flagging that you'll do something next week, so I hope everyone that's taking notes heard that and they can report it. But Councillor Burns, you know what the deadline is for submitting an alternate?
I'm just checking.
It hasn't changed in decades.
So that'll be 11 o'clock on Monday?
I think it's 12 o'clock actually.
All right, okay.
But just to help you, this is not a motion to build anything. So if you're going to suggest that we put the brakes on things, it's not going to achieve anything more than this achieves.
Yes, it will.
It will achieve nothing at all.
Don't count on it. You haven't read it yet.
Okay, well, send it through by the deadline. Councillors, any questions on the motion? Councillor Pine.
Thank you. I've got a few questions about the feedback from consultation, in particular the AHA report. In the AHA report, I read that essentially we've got an overall summary of the sentiment, which shows, negative, positive, and neutral, etc. Could you clarify the methodology on how that data was aggregated to arrive at the overall sentiment presented on page 3, which would sort of indicate a 50-50? There were 2,006 sentiment entries, yet there are only 1,067 responses, including duplicates. So I'd like to better understand how it was aggregated. And is the AHA report giving the right sentiment overview from the responses that have been prepared? It might help also the public to understand
Director
the
Corporate
the
Services.
Thank you. And through your presiding member, so the methodology was determined by AHA Consulting. So they're an independent firm who determined the methodology. Essentially what they tell us that they did is that they assessed each qualitative question in the survey for sentiment. So there were 688 survey respondents and each answered multiple qualitative questions, and they analysed all of those responses separately as one respondent could express different sentiments across different topics. The sentiment totals presented reflect the number of sentiment expressions identified across all of those responses rather than the number of individual responses. So the figure of 1,067 represents the total number of engagement responses received across all the engagement methods. So it's not necessarily the same as 1,067 unique individuals. So you kind of have to separate out how many individuals responded, how many responses were received, and then how many expressions of sentiment they counted in their sentiment.
Is there a technical problem? It seems like the mics keep cutting out. Councillor Pine.
So I've just got some follow-up questions. So essentially what I'm hearing is essentially if you give 2 comments, 2 negative comments, that counts as 2, as opposed to somebody giving 1 positive comment, that counts as 1, essentially, in the sentiment, just to clarify.
Through your presiding member, I'd have to take it on notice in terms of exactly how they split up the responses, because I do know, for example, that some submissions included 20 sentences, and I doubt that they would have taken every sentence on its own merit. So I'd have to take that on notice in terms of how they divided it up.
Thank you. Some more questions on the AHA report. I noted that we had 2 petitions with 500 signatures and over 1,000 signatures. How are these being incorporated into the overall sentiment pictures? Because obviously we as councillors take the report as information to form our view. We also have the raw data which we can go through, and we're actually going through that data. But the summary is actually quite important. So how are you planning to incorporate the petition data into that view and reconcile
is the question
potentially
about the
with
AHA report or about
Yeah.
what staff are doing?
the AHA report?
Okay, let's be clear on the answer then, because you're not the author of the AHA report, Director, but see what you can do.
Yep, that's okay. So AHA didn't include the petition results in their analysis because they were asked to analyse our engagement results of our surveys that were kind of controlled through our corporate channels. Nevertheless, we have tabled the petitions in the council report to be transparent that those were received. It should be noted as well that petitions, I'm not actually sure if they both remain open, so the numbers of submissions to those change as well. But we've absolutely noted in the report that those petitions are there for you to consider as well. Just one further comment on that is that if you were to attempt to combine the petitions with the survey results, there would be people that may have signed one and also made a submission, and it would be quite difficult to unpick, based on how they represented their names, etc., in either one, who might have made a submission in both. So I think the key for me is kind of looking at the key themes that arose are also very important for council to consider in terms of what was the community really agreed about and what was it not so agreed about in considering options for the future design. So not just the sentiment, but what does the community like, what do they not like is probably what you really want to focus on when making a decision as well.
Councillors. Councillor Fife.
Through you, Mayor, just with respect to item officer recommendation 2B, is can the CEO share the detail of the proposed methodology of assessing alternative options to house the council chambers and administration? And what are those alternatives going to be? And what is the matrix for comparison going to look like?
CEO.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Fife. So I think there's a couple of things in terms of that. There's a lot of detail to sort of synthesise into sort of some key options. Some elected members have also shared with them what they consider to be those key options. And we have a workshop in early April that what we'll do is we'll workshop with elected members because you all would have read every submission, you all will have seen every submission, and you've got the report information before you. And so it'll be up to elected members to work through how those options present. Obviously, some of them relate to some of the key options that have come out from the community in relation to obviously Rankin Gardens around keeping it as it is, for example. But in terms of the built form, there's already been comments that are quite consistent through this that, you don't need the council chambers out the front, or you don't need the exhibition space, or you don't need the community hub. So all of those present as sort of natural options by which council can consider. There's some other options that are in there in terms of a commercial option that people have recommended. So there's a range of different options that we would be able to present. And within that, so that we could compare as best as possible with apples and apples, or however you want to describe that, there will be a way by which we provide a range of financial and other information that assists council in the analysis of that, and in addition to sort of those sort of elements that are quantitative, there'd also be qualitative information in terms of considering those options. So it's really a process by which we can workshop with the elected members, and we can develop what are the appropriate options given all the feedback that we've got from the community. And so, and then we can put them side by side. Some will obviously come out quite easily in terms of that quantitative, but also the qualitative as well. And then there are ways by which, if council want to explore, or elected members want to explore, how you might consider those different elements. That would then all be put together in a business case for the elected members at a future council decision. And there'd be a range of information that's contained in the report that we think we'd be able to workshop with elected members. So, so it could be many, and there are a lot of suggestions from the community. So it'd be up to elected members as to how many of those options form part of the business case that comes back to council, and the veracity by which each of those have been, because obviously some require quite a lot of detailed information, and others there's sort of more simpler ways by which that assessment can be done.
Councillor Fife.
Thanks, and through you, Mayor. So many of those options that are alternative options about housing the council and the administration might involve commercial buildings or continuing to rent or acquisition of parts or whole of buildings. What time frame do you think that it will take to give adequate and thorough consideration by councillors, given the workshops and the type of decisions that we need to, and the breadth of considerations that we need to get across in order to get to a point where we can make not a hasty, but a good informed decision about such a weighty aspect of our future?
CEO.
Through the chair, I've always said that we'll move as fast as council wishes to move, and when you're ready for that report to come back. I think the April workshop, and we can do more workshops and put them together sooner, but there will, just on the options that I've just described and you've described, some are a lot easier to do than others. So I think what we'll be able to do is work through those. We've got some ideas about how we could fast track them, but that also then comes down to the level of comfort that the elected members or council have in terms of the analysis of those options. So some are very detailed in their consideration, so we just have to workshop that to say, look, we expect this will be back in a month. This might come back in 2 months. If we do this to a plus or minus whatever the percentage is, we can get it to this. So it's really a process by which, in developing a business case, the options and the level of detail provided in each of those options will give the council comfort that when we put that report to council, they're in a good position, and community can provide a range of feedback back on those as well, that you're in a good position to make a decision. So I can't say that it'll take a month. It'll certainly take longer than that. But depending upon the level of comfort you have with each of the documentation related to each option, then that will determine the length of time.
Thank you, CEO, and through you, Mayor. So you mentioned some community feedback on that. Will there be some community consultation, or do you anticipate a community consultation process around some of those alternatives? For example, the commercial options, or having the core aspects of the design being council chambers and admin potentially considered separately, so that can go out to the community for comment and feedback.
Yeah, so as I said, it will be an iterative process. We work with elected members in terms of the depth that's needed. And it's always open for council to say, yeah, we'd like to, this is a point where we think would be good to go back to the community to seek feedback, which may provide rationale for certain elements that the community have come up with, why council may wish to resolve why those types of, like staying here and continue to lease here, or whatever the option might be, why you may have ruled those out or not out. So yes, we can certainly do additional consultation at the appropriate time when we have the information that council feel comfortable in releasing.
Councillor Pine.
There's been a lot of feedback about cost of the building. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of why we haven't actually set an amount of a budget or a cost for the project that we were willing to spend on this, essentially? Because I guess if you're planning a renovation, etc., you've got a certain budget in mind. So why haven't we done that, and when are we going to set a budget for this?
Thanks, Councillor. I think we're probably expanding on some questions and answers that have been put during the week. Why don't we put it all on the record just so that everyone knows that, yeah, there'll be some new information and probably some additional things to expand upon Director Corporate Services.
Thank you, and through you, presiding members. So over time, we have provided various estimates, and elected members have been curious about things like affordability. And so partially, though, it comes down to scope. So it doesn't always make sense to have a budget for a project unless you are sure of what its scope is. So, for example, if you decide to go ahead with a building which is only for staff and council and doesn't include community function, it wouldn't make sense to set a budget which would be, too large which was large relative to that. And similarly, if you were going to have a building that included staff, council and community functions, you wouldn't want to set a budget too small. You want to set a budget that's just right based on the actual scope of the project. So what we've tended to do over time is provide council with estimates in terms of how much it would cost to do various things. And we've iterated that over time as conditions have changed. We've looked at things like affordability, so how much the council could afford, but all of that needs to be considered in the scope of what other priorities does council want to progress as well, and what's affordable overall in terms of all of the priorities that council wants to fund. So, it would be quite typical for a project which is still iterating its scope to be iterating its financial estimates and to have more of a set budget as part of the go, no-go decision on the project actually being implemented. So, when we get the tender results through, assuming this goes to tender for construction, when you get the actual tender results back from prospective tenderers, you will know with much more precision how much the project is likely to cost. And if you then appoint a tenderer, then that will become essentially the budget going forward from that point in time. You also have to be a little bit careful in the local government context around the use of the word budget, because under legislation, council can only set budget 1 year in advance in terms of authorising expenditure, by the CEO and the organisation on various things. But that doesn't mean that council couldn't resolve at any point in time, if it wanted to, an upper cap on this project.
Okay, councillors, questions? Councillor Burns.
Through you, Mayor McMahon, has the administration, in dealing with the appointed architects, been advised by these said architects that internationally, what is referred to as mass timber, which was included in this design that they put forward, has fallen out of favour due to its insurability? In some cases, it's uninsurable, or it's cost restrictive in its insurance costs. Have they advised you of blowouts with concerns to its cost to be included in constructions, and the international community harbouring concerns about its longevity as to maintenance? Now, it is difficult. I will note that it's difficult for the architects to raise such issues if they harbour them, considering what they built for Murdoch University, which is made of mass timber. And now all these issues arise. But I'm not guessing this, these are stated facts internationally. It's the aerobics lasted longer as a concept than this thing did. It came up and it is already out the door, but it's still. So have they raised any of these points with you? Thank you.
Who's best placed to answer that? Okay, Manager, Commercial Services and Property, Joel Guest.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Burns. Through the Mayor, so I'm not sure of the facts that you're referring to, Councillor Burns. happy to have that discussion offline. But we are aware through the architects of some projects that have been very successful with CLT or cross-laminated timber. And you referred to the project at Murdoch University, Bulla Catagen, which I believe many of the elected members were invited to go and look at that project. But what I would say is the concept that is currently being worked on by the design team, only a very small component of it is cross-laminated timber. Most of it is very conventional construction, and it's only essentially the council chambers which they're proposing in CLT, which is proposed, including to give it a certain aesthetic and feeling to that space. So certainly not the whole building, just a very small component of it.
Sure. CEO.
Perhaps if I can also add, there's quite a bit of feedback from the community in terms of design elements and material elements, and so part of that would be for Lions to also obviously feed that back into the design considerations, because there's certainly some feedback relating to, is this sort of something that's a Subiaco type structure. So Lions certainly are progressing the types of materials that could be used, and that would certainly be open for council to consider to exclude that. It was contained within the architectural concept that they originally designed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that council going forward could choose any option and can choose any material. So an important part of that is understanding sourcing of materials and how long they live, because total cost of ownership is a really important part. And the other important part is the design by which you finalise is to reduce, hopefully, operating costs by the manner in which it's constructed, oriented with the sun and all those elements. So it's something that council can progressing it more information, whether or not that's an appropriate material. It was included in the concept as part of the two-stage process, but that doesn't necessarily mean the council have to build with the use of that material.
Yeah, I think we've got off your original question, but before you do a follow-up, Councillor Burns, if I can just supplement the answer as well, because there has been discussion about the trappings of using new technologies, and it may even have been at one of the workshops that you attended. I don't know if you raised it or someone else did, but I distinctly remember discussion with the architects about whether it was wise to be embracing this technology and what it might mean for the future proofing of the building. And to answer your question, Councillor, no, they haven't advised us of the things you're saying, because they don't hold those views. Now, whether you're right and they're wrong is a different question, but no, they haven't advised us of that. Your follow-up.
And I accept why architects, there's an international movement right now criticising architects that they don't understand money, that they just understand design. So now I'm just adding that in, it's not a question. But it's little things that, why I asked had they brought it up, because even if you, as Mr. Guest said, even if it's just a small portion, right, it can be caught by insurance. You can say, okay, well, it's only 5% of the whole building. And they say, well, unfortunately, 5% is enough to whack it into the category that puts the insurance through the roof, okay? So these are the sort of things. It's just not, I'm not trying to criticise it. I'm just saying just keep it in mind. That's all. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to follow up a little bit about the budget, but first off, we have got all the feedback back, and would it be, I think AHA found that perhaps the biggest problem that people thought was cost. Is that the main complaint, the cost of the project?
Director Corporate Services.
Yeah, through you, presiding member, I'd have to have a look at the report to confirm that it was the top issue, but I believe that's pretty much in line with what the report says.
This brings me to the point about the budget, because there seemed to be quite a bit of concern about cost blowouts, about and why there wasn't a set budget. Will this resolution in some way end up saying, when it's completed, will it end up saying somehow, look, this is what we're prepared to spend, and we're not prepared to spend any more, that this is our budget? Because I think a couple of years ago, that was, it came up in debate. That was one of the reasons why I didn't support it, was because there was no fixed budget, and it seems to me to be quite a concern that comes through as well in the feedback. So from this resolution, are we going to get a budget?
CEO.
So firstly, we've been on this process since 2021, but really the council's been on this process for about 30 years, and it's stopped at each occasion, predominantly concerned about cost. Certainly would have been a lot cheaper had they have done it back in the day, but they haven't, so the decision falls to yourselves. In terms of cost, so this is the third architect we've used since 2021, and on each occasion we've got estimates from experts to give us values as to what the likely cost would be if we were to build. Now, on each of those occasions, as you'd know, the costs have significantly increased since we started that back in probably the first elected members workshop I remember was early 2022. So you don't have a concept yet as a council. You haven't determined anything. So we can't provide we can tell you how much each of the options cost and what the escalation factor might be, but until such time as you arrive, you won't have a project budget. As Director of Corporate Services said, each year council adopt the budget. That's a figure that you expect to spend at that point in time. It is open for council to choose the option that they consider is appropriate with a cost estimate that they get at that point in time. So it'll have escalation factors as we've described in the total cost, including demolition and those sorts of things. So each option will be slightly different. When council choose an option, whatever that is, that we go to implement, as Director of Corporate Services said, we will really only know the true build cost of that when the tenders come back. Now that, once again, is a decision for council to determine whether to proceed or not to proceed with the tenders that come back. And if council determine not to proceed, you've got, I think, 6 months under the Local Government Act to negotiate a build. And if you're still not happy, then you would potentially go to re-tender, or you could adjust the scope. One of the most important elements that the feedback that I'm getting back from the industry is that the better your documentation is, the better your analysis of this supply chain, as Councillor Burns has quite rightly put out, that's actually really critical. Can you get the materials? What price you can get them? So until council determine what the option is they wish to proceed on, and we can estimate those within the options, and then once the documentation is done to a sufficient standard, you go to tender, then you'll have the price, and council determine to proceed or not to proceed. But the business case will clearly articulate those costs, and that's whether you want to call it a project budget or whatever you want to call it, and council will determine what it's prepared to spend based on the option it chooses with the information that's available at that point in time.
Could I just also observe that at one of those early workshops, it was specifically requested that staff provide us advice on what we might be able to afford and how we might afford it. That was all provided very early on, so we need to be very careful about saying there hasn't been a project budget. That is true in some senses, but we've certainly had advice along the way. Yeah. Now there's a few hands up. Was there a follow-up from you, Councillor Powell?
Yes, there is, Mayor, but I've got some other questions as well. So,
okay, we'll get yours finished, and then we can move to someone else.
Will I move to the other questions?
I think so. Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
But it would be up to the council, though, to say, look, we don't want to spend any more than this amount, and that would be a different approach than the one we've been taking. You know, because at the moment we're saying we're taking we've got one view about how we can approach it, but there is another approach that you could say, look, we don't want to spend any more than so many $1 million. Please design a project, you know, with this sort of scope that fits that. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, everything's a possibility. It's up to council to determine whether it wants to do that. It should understand the implications of doing that approach, because you're basically reverse engineering all the work that you've done since February 2022, which is about an analysis of the functions that you think are appropriate, given that you know. So you could do that, but then what you could do is we may still need to lease part of this building, etc. So I think you just want to be clear in terms of what that was delivering, but it could be done. That would be signalling when you go to tender as to what you expect to pay, and that may result in tenders or no tenders. So it is an approach. Generally, those sort of values you keep to yourself in some way. You do the estimates about what they might do, and then you go to the request for tender, and that hopefully provides competitive tension. As I said, if you've got good documentation, you understand the sourcing materials, then you've probably got a better chance of getting in a fixed price contract, which is, there are those still available today with good documentation. So you could reverse the way in which the process, but ultimately the various council resolutions that I've been implementing haven't suggested that approach.
Yes, thank you. I've got a couple of other questions about the feedback. Look, I'm going to go back to another old one of mine about the looking at the refurbishment. I noticed that is one of the that is included in the looking at that is included in the resolution. Would that looking at refurbishment also include perhaps, you know, sort of if the perhaps even putting a second story, you know, onto the current premises?
Yeah, if I could through the chair. I mentioned we'd sort of workshop. We got a strong feedback around that. There's a council resolution that says that we're going to demolish and rebuild, assuming certain things are delivered, which is project management plan, etc., in 2022. But the analysis around the business case, it makes sense to do that analysis, and that might be, and that's where I think we should discuss at the elected members workshop the extent to which it does a couple of things. One might be, as some have suggested in the community, that we just refurbish what currently is. But in addition to that, if the elected members wish for a different type of refurbishment of that building, likewise. I think that refurbish what is and something slightly greater, I think they're probably going to be the ones that will take more time and more analysis, particularly if you're looking to do beyond the single level story that it is. So I think it comes down to my earlier comments to Councillor Fife around the extent of the information and whether that's of a state, because those sorts of analysis you can spend some serious dollars on to make sure you've got the engineering expertise. Or I think, as Councillor Pines mentioned, you can do analysis up to X percentage of plus or minus as well. So it really comes down to that what are the options that council are keen to understand, and then how do we put them side by side with quantitative and qualitative information. And then that would be, I think our directors put a hand up as well, as obviously not liking my answer.
But before you have a go, Director, I would also note that I think it was Councillor Pine has remarked that it would be good to workshop what the options actually are going to be sooner rather than later. I think my response was yes, I agree, and perhaps we haven't closed the loop, but I certainly remember discussing it with you yesterday, CEO, about who from outside might facilitate such a workshop, and I believe you've been getting some quotes and some suitable people to guide us through that exercise. But there certainly is that exercise that councillors need to do once there's been time to, I suppose, work through the submissions in as much detail as you'd like. But I think it's worth noting that the exercise hasn't been undertaken, but it's certainly been acknowledged that that it will be undertaken and it will be fit into the workshop schedule as soon as the planets align. Director Corporate Services, you were going to supplement the CEO's earlier answer before I cut you off.
Thank you. Through you, presiding member. No, the CEO's answer was as always very good, but just looking to supplement it a little bit in terms of you might just want to think about it a little bit iteratively as well. So we've got more qualitative information for you to digest now. So for example, all of the community feedback that you have now and the AHA report you have now to digest. We've got some other pieces of information coming as well. So things around the trees, things around our community centre utilisation, etc., which we can take you through, which will help to inform you in terms of what options you want to consider. You might also want to look at the analysis on some options before asking for more, because in doing some analysis on some base options, you might actually go, oh, I see now, we need to cut out this chain of options completely, but we actually need to expand the options here a little bit. You don't necessarily want to go in up front with 100 options on a plotter page that you kind of go, let's do every single option under the sun and how they compare, before you've gone through a little bit of qualitative information and assessment of a smaller subset first potentially. So not to rule out doing any analysis that you would like, absolutely, but just think of it perhaps as more of an iterative process if that is helpful.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, look, back onto the feedback. Some residents, reading that feedback, some residents have obviously put quite a bit of thought into their submissions. They've got detailed suggestions. How are they, will these be given any more weight than someone who's just said, you know, I don't like it or I do like it, and has provided, you know, no further information? How are we going to weigh the value of the input?
Director Corporate Services.
Thank you, through your presiding member. Well, there's probably no mathematical equation which will allow you to weight different pieces of different responses, but you all and we have all of those responses. A lot of the officers on the project have read practically every response that came through, at least with a passing glance, acknowledging how many they were. It's difficult to, you know, but when we have glimmered things to pick up, and you are more than elected members, go through the feedback, see what you can glean as well that you would like to elevate for further consideration, absolutely surface that. I believe, I don't know if the design team has all of the pieces of feedback as well. They have been going through the feedback as it's been coming through and considering what glimmers that they can add into considering you know, changes to the design as well, and they can talk to you about those, as they already have done. They already spoke to you about some of those things. So absolutely open to considering any particular submission or idea that you've heard from the community outside of the surveys as well. Ideas, you know, being on their own merit rather than necessarily always being a mathematical equation of how many people said what.
Okay, thank you, and through you, Mayor. This is hopefully one of the final questions. The AHA report, is that going to be, is that available to members of the public to download from our website? Because I think it contains far more information that some people might find interesting than just, I've just to make sure that people are aware that it is a public document that they can access. So,
Yeah, through your presiding member, I can also add to the yes, which is that it is an attachment to this report, but we've also put out some information through our social media channels, at least, in terms of letting people know that the results of the survey have been analysed, and this is where you can find it.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone on this side? Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor. With the business cases that are going to be delivered, will that go out to tender for an independent external consultant to prepare those?
Yeah, if I could, through the chair. Not everything requires a tender, so tender is to a particular value, and we also have access to Wagga suppliers, etc. But yeah, we are looking to engage some people to assist council through that process, and would have the requisite skills to provide you external advice in relation to a model that would crunch the numbers, so to speak, but also provide the quantitative analysis. So yeah, we have some quotes.
And I know there's been a number of emails from councillors to the CEO and about what sort of measures would be people would like. Will that, and that's not actually the specifics are not noted in this recommendation. So will that be something that comes to a workshop that we get to just determine what that report, what that business case would entail?
Yeah, if I can through the chair, absolutely. So that'll be that first workshop. We'll start the process by which we can develop the components that make sense to be in a business plan, and how the analysis side by side of all the options that you want to explore, and that'll be really important because whenever that business plan's ready with all the information, no doubt we've got a lot of intelligent people that live in our community and would be keen to sort of consider that information when it's coming to council. So absolutely, that's part of the process for us to be able to put that together and get some external validation as well, and make sure that the report's going to make sense to yourselves and to the community when it eventually comes to council.
So that report would be available to the public?
Yeah, if I can through the chair, it would form the basis, I imagine, just like this council meeting. It'd be an attachment, and so it would go out, and it'd be up to elected members as to how soon they wish to release it, etc. So I think that's to discover, but essentially the business case would be all of the information by which you would then be able to determine, as I've previously described, the option that council wished to pursue, and that would form part of the report that went to council. So it'd be an important component of decision making and open for the community to read and provide comment.
And given this, where we're at now, that this is going to go off to someone independent to do business case analysis of a number of far-ranging options, actually, would this be an appropriate time in the process to update and inform the architects about where we're at, and to advise them to pause any further iterations or work on design until we have determined the way forward, and then ask them to continue?
Director Corporate Services.
Yep, through you, presiding member, we have been talking about where they're up to and what they've been working on the few options that centre on the design that was released for consultation. So there's the base case, there's reduced versions which help to respond to the community feedback by taking out specific community functions, and they're nearly at the end of that work. So there may well be a natural pause while elected members and council take the time to deliberate on the options ahead of them. We need to take a little bit of care, because if we leave the architects for too long, they'll be wanting to reallocate staff to other projects. So we do need to be mindful of how much time we pause them for. But we do see that at the moment is a natural time for them to finish up work on those options while you consider the options.
Okay, councillors, any other questions? I think that's C3 for this week. We'll certainly pick it up next week and in between. Okay, C4, Local Government Reform, Code of Conduct for Council Members, Committee Members and Candidates. Any questions on C4? Doesn't look like it. Of course, all these things are subject to probing by email during the week as well, so nothing goes unchecked. Okay, C5, Walga consultation on local government electoral reforms. Councillor De Vries.
Just a really short question. Should the decision be made for compulsory voting and the 4-year cycle and the minister says, yep, we're going to press the button next year, through you, Mayor, obviously, sorry. Do you have a plan yet, or are you working on a plan for how to get the community to know that they have a decision and a responsibility? I know that that is something that Walga's working on, but are we working on it as well? Thank you.
Director of Corporate Services, a question for you or perhaps the manager. Ms. Edwards, no? Why not?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So we haven't had any of the information yet come through. So this is, as you would have seen in the report, and actually one of the questions that went around. This is the Walga have just sort of been getting in front of what they assume is to be coming. So we would then, if it did come through, we'd probably be expecting that if it becomes compulsory, there'd be parts to do on the Electoral Commission, and Walga would also have some involvement in letting the community know, and we'd be a part of that community consultation as well. It would be a sector-wide approach.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. The concerns, obviously, that local governments have had is that they wouldn't have a lot of time to do that. What does the director feel would be a reasonable expectation for time? Because if it comes to the wire and we've only got a few months, you know, it's going to be a lot of work.
Director of Corporate Services.
Yeah, through you, presiding member. I would think that, where, the minister has started talking about it, we can't really preempt what timing she's going to put on it, but I think she'd want to give the sector a fair bit of warning to get ahead of it, especially in terms of, understanding the implementation, if there's anything that we need to do differently from what we do today in terms of preparing for an election, she'd be having her people look at that to understand how far in advance to give the sector notice. That said, compulsory voting is already standard for other levels of government voting, and in other states, local government voting is compulsory. So I think that those things would be reasonably well understood in terms of what's required and getting the word out there. People are used to voting, in a compulsory kind of way for state and federal, so it's not really new to them in terms of what it means to have to vote. And I would anticipate, as the manager said as well, that it would be a sector-wide campaign to generate awareness that it is now compulsory.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Powell.
Yes, look, thank you. I'm a bit confused about this because the Walga position was that, my understanding was, and from the report, that they're 4-year terms with a 2-year spill and voluntary voting. And I thought that was what we were supporting. And yet I see, under election frequency, our report says 4-year full spill elections are generally supported. So which one are we actually supporting?
Ms. Wollaston?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, presiding members. So I think the comment reads something like 4-year elections could be supported, but we don't see a burning platform to change from the current system, but it's of course open to council to form whatever view it likes. Walga has traditionally had, position. I think it was around voluntary and 2 years. That's right, manager. Thank you. However, that doesn't mean that they might not change that position. It's always based on what opinions they derive from the sector, and that's what they're doing at the moment, is refreshing, the set of views from the sector to make an informed representation to the department.
No, sorry, I'm still confused. The executive summary says, full spill elections every 4 years, but to my reading, that was not what the Walga position was. It was, every 2 years. Spill every 2 years. So, and that's what it says, and what was supported. So. Apologies. It just seems to be a direct contradiction, so I'm just trying to clarify what the actual standing is.
Manager Governance and Strategy.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So just to go through, it might help just to step through a little bit of the background. So currently, Walga's advocacy position, they're supporting the 2-year spill and the voluntary. And a number of years ago, we also had a council resolution to support that. There has since been conversation around from the minister into saying, what about if we had a look at the 4-year and the compulsory? And so Walga are just touching out to say their position hasn't changed at the moment. They are still voluntary and 2-year, but they're just putting their feelers back out to sense, has that changed? And so we've had put some thoughts forward in terms of if it did go to 4 years, this is kind of what some of the benefits might be and to weigh up. So in our current resolution, council's current resolution that stands is supporting, which I think was a couple of years ago. It's in the report supporting that, and we're just putting forward just to say, well, there's an option. We're saying, look, some of the benefits if we did go to 4 years. It's not currently Walga's position, but they're asking, is there appetite?
So just for clarity, if we're supporting this recommendation, then what we are supporting is the current Walga position of 2-year and voluntary, 2-year spills and voluntary.
Can I just ask, the staff in the attachment when it puts in the, the staff, what is the word, submission? Yeah, that you're asking us to endorse at the next meeting, that is not actually in line with what Walga's current view is, and that was their view a couple of years ago, which in fact we voted on, which was that we endorsed a couple of years ago when, in fact, I think Penny and I moved and seconded to maintain voluntary voting as opposed to compulsory and to have a 2-year turnover. This is in contradiction to that.
Sure. So there's questions about consistency with previous council resolutions, but also questions about consistency with Walga's position. So if you can speak to all of that, Director of Corporate Services, please.
Yeah, so just in speaking to that, so what Walga is essentially asking the sector to do is to consider the matter with fresh eyes and to, kind of really consider what are the pros and cons of either approach and get back to them. So we drafted some responses. I believe that we circulated that via email. I think we did, just confirming with the manager a couple of weeks ago, and we asked for feedback on that, any input from elected members. And I don't think that we received any. And so we've kept the draft responses as we had in the bulletin. Not that, a lack of saying anything represents endorsement. It's down to a council decision, but it's absolutely open to council to amend the draft officer comments based on council's view and what you wish to put forward to Walga. But what Walga is doing, Walga only represents its members, and so that is why it is seeking the views of its members once again to see if they've changed since the last position. It wouldn't necessarily be a slight to them or a slight to yourselves to change your mind on the situation.
Councillor De Vries.
Through you, Mayor, just in terms of the advocacy of Walga on this issue, it's generally my understanding that they do have some influence on the minister, but she's spoken so often, so publicly. Is it the view of the Director for Corporate Services that this would be perhaps ultimately the minister's decision, and this is just an exercise in ticking the box, so to speak? Thank you.
Yeah, so it's an interesting point because Wolga, if you kind of read the context for why they raised this consultation, their concern is that the minister is not going to actively consult the sector in regards of this reform, as they have done with some other reforms, and that is why they've preemptively raised this survey just to gauge, you know, does the sector still support the previous position, or has the sector's views changed? And then their idea would then be that they would then put that forward to the department. They don't often ask for, they don't always ask for council endorsed views on positions. We often seek it if there is time, we prefer that. But this is one of those few occasions where they have sought council endorsed views because they really want to know what council thinks. So I do, you know, if you would like to put forward a view, you know, encourage you to consider it.
Okay. Councillor De Vries. Councillor Pine.
I guess if it does move to compulsory voting, has there been due consideration to the non-resident occupiers who would be forced to actually do compulsory voting, and also the business owners that are actually ratepayers, essentially, because there are quite differences between local government election and the federal election, for example?
Yeah, through you, presiding member. And so, yeah, so we understand that the practice in other states is that for those non-resident potential voters, that they still have to opt in. So they still have to approach, you know, the local government to be enrolled, first of all, and then it becomes compulsory for them to vote. So it's not necessarily compulsory for them to vote until they say, I opt into being on the roll. So that's what we understand to be the practice.
Councillor Fife.
Yep. I'm puzzled as to, even though you've distributed this as an elected member, an EMIB or whatever, that the narrative is in contrast to what the previously resolved position of council was, which was a block resolution that they supported split and non-compulsory voting, and yet this narrative seems to be in direct contrast to that. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't, and if we were going to change our position, then we would have come up as an option or an opportunity to debate and then make a resolution around that. But in the absence of changing our mind, why does it reflect a change of heart?
Sure. Ms. Wilson.
Through you, presiding member. Yeah, so I guess that it comes down to partially the role of the CEO and staff is to provide advice to the council, and so that's essentially what we've done in this report is considered the factors at play and just provided some advice to you. I think it probably wouldn't be good governance to say in providing advice that we only rely on prior council resolutions. Council resolutions do direct us in terms of if you direct us to do a certain thing, then we are required to implement that. But in writing reports, we're advising you. To be honest, I don't think that anybody in the writing of this report was particularly wedded either way. We just considered the factors at play. And it's and you mentioned when do we get the chance to debate this, and wouldn't that be the appropriate course? That's absolutely what you're supposed to do next week.
Sorry, I've probably distracted you, Councillor De Vries. Was there a question?
Through you, Mayor. I mean, there's something that you didn't mention in the report, which might be useful, is that some of the mitigating factors for doing the 4-year cycle and some of the factors for why we do that, is it not because that the number of people voting has really decreased? Is that something that you could put in the report, the statistics? The decline has been quite marked, I think, since I've been on council. Would that be helpful to inform elected members of how this sort of informed view came about? Sorry.
Director Corporate Services.
Sorry.
Yeah, through you, presiding member. Absolutely, elected members are always welcome to ask for any information that you would like to support your decision making. So if you'd like to request that kind of information, we can provide it. I think there is a comment in there around, we tried to keep it fairly innocuous in terms of if it is compulsory voting, then you're going to get votes which are more representative of the views of the whole community, not just those that turn out to vote. There are other points of view that say that maybe it's better to have voluntary because then it's the people that are really interested and that have informed themselves that are voting. So there are many different ways of looking at this question, and we always are open to providing you with information to support you in your decision making.
I'll take the opportunity and then I'll come to you, Councillor Johnston. Director of Corporate Services, it seems that the proposed response is essentially the staff view of the world. It seems that the advice from the staff perspective is that you would rather roll the dice every 4 years and work with a completely new council potentially than deal with the turnover that happens every 2. Is that really the staff preference, that you'd rather face full spills every 4 years and potentially work with full councils as a result, new councils every 4 years? Is that a commonly held view amongst staff members?
Look, I think.
I mean, on this you probably should answer. CEO.
Yeah, look, I think there's been so much change in terms of, obviously, once upon a time, most of the mayors were elected by their peers every 2 years. And then now it's mandated that mayors are elected every 4 years for a 4-year term. So I think probably each staff member may have a view. I think the important bit is what's council's view. And ordinarily when these things have happened in the past, a few elected members get together and nut out what they think the view of council would be. So we put something out there. There are examples around Australia where it works well and where it doesn't work well. And I think the most important thing is, what I always say, it doesn't really matter what the system is, it's what you do with it that counts. So I think there's some benefits to 4-year terms in terms of the reduced cost, because it only happens at one time. In addition to that, your inductions, etc. And there may well be disruptions if projects that are longer term have a large turnover every 2 years. So there's benefits. I'm happy to hand over to you, Director of Corporate Services, but I'm just saying you'll find a divergence.
I'm sure you're capable of speaking on behalf of your staff, CEO, so I might just leave it at that. But I suppose I was just really wanting to get a sense of whether you say that it's up to council to form a view, and of course it is, and we'll turn our minds to how disruptive we think it is every 2 years when an election comes along. But is the staff preference that you would rather have 4-year spills of the whole council, 4 yearly spills of the whole council? Is that actually the recommendation? If it is, that's fine. I just want to be clear on what that is, and then council will form a view on what it prefers. Okay, Director Corporate Services.
Thank you. Through your presiding member. So in writing the commentary, we weren't considering it from our perspective. We were trying to place ourselves in council's shoes in terms of the advantages and disadvantages. One of the main concerns that sometimes arises in relation to 4-year terms and full spills is, as you say, do you really want to have a whole new council every time? From a personal perspective, I have worked in Victoria local government where there was compulsory voting and 4-year spills. We would usually retain 2/3 of the incumbent elected members, very similar to what we do here at Subiaco. So that is why, personally, I don't have large concerns. The only time when you tend to get full spill turnout, like every single person on the council changes, there'd have to be a huge amount of community dissatisfaction, and usually elected members who are incumbent want to see continuity of the council, so you don't usually also get everybody retiring at once, and that's what the data from Walga demonstrates as well.
Thanks. An interesting discussion tonight and possibly next week as well. Councillor Johnston.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, through you. I'm just wondering, in other states that have compulsory voting, I hear that some of these candidates are put forward by political parties and funded by political parties, and that changes the sort of the nature of the people in local government and what they're there for and why they're there. Do staff consider that a risk with compulsory voting?
The CEO's got a good political nous to him. CEO, do you consider it to be a risk?
Look, there's a few ways to look at that. It could happen. Some would say it's already there. So I think it depends on who you talk to. In one state, I believe it's very overt in terms of, I think it's Queensland, if I recall, where it's actually stated you're running on a particular ticket. So I don't understand that's the suggestion here. But certainly, as I've said, every system can work, every system can fail, is what you do with it. So that may happen. That may happen more in one particular area or less. But ultimately, what is happening with compulsory is that you actually know that that is the vote that's occurred. In the same way as non-compulsory, you know that's the vote as well. So, and that's potentially those people more interested in the outcome, and therefore they've voted. So there's pros and cons with each. Generally, all other jurisdictions across Australia are compulsory to turn up, I suppose. Otherwise, you get a fine. Whether you fill in the form correctly or not, that's up to yourself. And probably just answer the other question about all in or all out. The Legislative Council in the state had that same concern when they changed from 3-year terms in WA to 4-year terms. So they went from half in, half out, and they went to all in, all out. So it is something that, both at state and then certainly in federal, they're still on 3-year terms, and the Senate obviously changes over half. So each, like I said, each can be beneficial. It's difficult to anticipate how that may play out within the city of Subiaco.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, just getting back to this recommendation though that we've got in front of us. Look, we do have a previous council decision, so I'm just trying to figure out how we deal with it. We've got a previous council decision. Would it require an alternative to support the previous council decision? Would it require, reaffirmation of the, if that's what we decide? How do we actually? Does it require almost a revocation motion? If we're going to disagree, follow staff, on the staff,
I understand the question. There was a bit of discussion when I referred to it as being a potential alternative. We'll give that some thought, because the recommendation just refers to an attachment, and if we were to swap out one attachment and replace it with another, would it be an amendment? Would it be an alternative? Well, it would depend what was in the attachment and whether it's negating the officer recommendation or not. So there will be a way of achieving something other than what staff have recommended, but we'll just give that some thought. But I would offer my view on the world as to whether we're revoking the previous motion, and no, we're not, because that was supporting Walga's position for a particular purpose at a particular point in time, which was October 2024. Now we're being asked again, essentially a very similar question, but for a different process. So I don't think we're revoking any previous resolutions, but it does, I suppose, call into question what has changed since October 2024, if anything, and shall council change its position on the matter or not? Okay, are we done with the questions on C5? Okay, C6, the mid-year budget review. Councillor Johnston.
Thanks. Yes, through you, Mayor. The financial activity statement, mid-year budget review, there's some major variances. I wonder if someone could briefly outline what they're mainly due to. For example, net operating activities, I think there's a variance of 42%. Would someone perhaps speak to the major variances in that?
Manager Finance Services, thank you.
Thank you for your question, and through you, Chair. So some of the major variances within, I'm starting the operating activity section itself. So within operating revenue, our biggest increase, we've got an 80% increase in profit on assets. So that's the sale of 6 Rupert Street, where the settlement occurred on the 2nd of July. So it just ticked into this financial year, where it had been previously budgeted in the prior financial year. So it was just a timing as to where that one ended up landing through the actuals. So we've made an adjustment to the budget in this year for that. The other major increase within the operating revenue itself is around interest revenue. So this is primarily on our term deposits themselves. So when we did the initial budget, we went on a more conservative approach because the interest rates were declining. So we estimated about 3.5% interest return on our TDs over the 12 months. That's actually been significantly higher. So we've got a lot more revenue in that space. In addition to that, the cash that we've actually got in the bank is a little bit higher than we initially predicted. Our ratepayers here are very good at paying their rates, and we receive above 60% in our first, the total payment. So we weren't too sure on where payments were going to land in this financial year with the change of all the instalment dates, but we've had more cash in the bank than initially anticipated, so that's why we've got quite a large increase there. The bigger increases within your operating activities, the expenditure side. So we've got 9% within our materials and contracts. Big portions of that are around the additional costs around our street trees and our weed control that I know Council have been engaged on in the last few months with our Manager of Parks and Director of Technical Services. Also within that space is increase in agency staff. So where we've had vacancies within our normal FTE, we've had replacements within agency staff. Agency staff are a different nature and type, so we've just increased the budget there, but you do see a corresponding decrease in the budget on the employee cost line. The other major one is on utility charges, so an increase in 15%. So we've had higher utility usage in the electricity space, and also the increase that came through from Western Power we didn't have when we did the initial budget, and now we've factored that in to increase that cost. So between the two, it actually puts our net operating position in a better place. So the initial budget we had a loss of just over 4 million. We've been able to bring that back to just over 3 million, which is in a much better operating deficit. Do you want me to keep going through every single section? No?
I'll just find my notes. Thank you for that. The other one I was wondering about was the negative 50% variance on the inflow from investing activities.
Yes, so thank you for the question through you, Chair. So though it's got a negative number there, it's actually an increase. So proceeds is money coming in, so we're actually getting a little bit more. But a big part of that is 1.6 million, which is our proceeds on sale of the Rupert Street property, which again, the settlement just ticked over into this financial year.
And the right of use assets received.
So thank you for the question through you, Chair. So right of use assets received. So there's actually also a corresponding line in regards to the proceeds of new lease liability. So the two go together and they're both non-cash items. So there's a net impact of 0 on our bottom line itself. But that's around our leasing of our strength cardio, one of the leases at Lords. So it's just getting the cost of that correct. So at the time of doing the budget, we didn't have the full information, especially around what the interest component was going to be. We've got that now, so we've done the adjustment.
And just a typo on your credit card payment summary, it's reading as February 2025 instead of 2026.
Thank you. We'll get that one changed very soon.
Go to Councillor O'Connor first, then Councillor Pine. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. The improvements for the Shenton Park Community Centre and the improvements in Rockaby Road South have both been deferred. As they're both council plan projects, could I just get an update on when they'll be progressing, where they're at? Thanks.
Director Corporate Services.
Thank you. Through you, presiding member, and I can throw to Director Technical Services if needed to on Rockaby Road South. But essentially, both of those projects absolutely have been priorities as they are council plan projects. Shenton Park Community Centre went to community consultation. We got the results of that late last July, and then we also tabled that and got some additional input from elected members in September. Due to the nature and volume of feedback received, it's just been taking the design team a little bit longer to incorporate that than initially anticipated. We anticipate returning to elected members with a further update in the next few months on that particular project. And then if elected members / council are happy to proceed further, we should be able to go to tender not too long after that, and potentially commence works during this calendar year. So Rockaby Road South is a bit of a similar story where you may recall there was some information that came to elected members regarding the surface treatment and some options that were put forward to discussion, and elected members did request to discuss those further, and consideration of those design options meant that that project also has taken a little bit longer in the design phase, wanting to make sure that that the design is right before proceeding. I understand that project is also ready to go to tender. I can throw to Director Technical Services if you have any further information on that project.
Probably just to confirm that yes, the 100% design is complete and ready for tendering as soon as next month.
Councillor Pine.
I've got a couple of questions. The first one is on the expenditure on parks. We were meant to spend 4.7 million this year, and now we are only able to spend 3.6 million, so 1.1 million less than what we'd forecast. Could you explain a little bit why, given the importance of the parks to the community?
Director Technical Services.
Thank you for your question. So primarily we've had to bring back a couple of projects that require further reconsideration. So we have some irrigation projects which we need to reassess, and that's going to take a bit longer as far as the design work. So they're not in a position to deliver this year. Additionally, we've had some limitations of internal resourcing to deliver some projects. So that's since been overcome. We've got some very capable landscape architects, in fact, on staff to deliver projects, but that we have had a turnover during the year, which has limited our projects and forced us to prioritise towards the council plan projects. So that's primarily things around the greening projects like Ada Street, Hay Street, which we'll be embarking upon soon, and also assisting, because obviously there's a lot of involvement around the civic precinct and looking at the Rankin Gardens there. So they've had to prioritise that on those and deprioritise on a couple of other less urgent projects, such as capital projects.
Thank you. And the second question I had, if you look at the overall capital works, we were meant to spend 16 million this year, and we are underspending by 6 million overall. Now, if I look at the whole of the expenditure within the council, we're still spending the money. So where are we spending that other 6 million? Or have I got something wrong?
Director Corporate Services.
Sorry, and I might throw to the manager as well. But so I think you'll find that the capital expenditure within the proposed mid-year review budget is $6 million lower. So it's not being spent elsewhere. It would be retained within the reserve.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, any more questions on the mid-year budget review? Looks like we can move on to C7, the financial statements and reports for the month ending 28 Feb 2026. Any questions on C7? Councillor Powell.
Thank you. Look, this may have partially been answered, I think, in the last question, but as of the 28th of February, the city's debt surplus was $13,559,000. Does that indicate good financial handling, or should we have a surplus really that much higher than what we had budgeted for?
Does this require a CPA? A CEO?
Happy to hand over to some other accountants as well in the room. There's a few. Apologies for that. So part of that, in terms of you're referring to the year to date, right? So we count all the rates as it comes in, as it's invoiced. So that's the 27, almost 28 million in that regard. But obviously the expenditure, we're at about 18 million on employee costs, and that'll end up being 26 million. So we'll progress towards a slightly negative net operating position, and that's what's described in the half-year review. If we were to achieve everything in terms of both revenue and expenditure, that's where we would end up at that net operating position. It's just under 3 mil negative. And as you know, in the past, I've quite often said that it's okay to be negative at net operating in terms of revenue and expenditure, but not over the long term. And generally, Subiaco over the longer term has a slight positive net operating, and I think that's important. But we are undertaking some big project works which are expensed; they're not capitalised, and such as digital transformation, a range of other projects that is sort of a once-off type expense. So yes, it looks big at the moment. Towards the end of the year, it'll be less. However, it's always difficult predicting exactly what you're going to spend and exactly the income that you're going to earn. And in most years, we, even though we might budget for a slight loss, generally we arrive with a slight profit at net operating. So we'll see where we land, but as you just described, the previous report articulated if we were to do everything in terms of revenue and expenditure, it'd probably land up at a just under $3 million loss at net operating.
Councillors, any other questions on C7? Doesn't look like it. Okay, that's the end of the agenda briefing forum. I note there'll be at least one confidential item on next week's agenda, but we'll deal with that behind closed doors next week in the usual way. Therefore, I declare the agenda briefing forum of the 17th of March 2026 closed. Thank you, councillors, for your attendance, and thank you, staff, for your assistance.